Okay, so hello everybody. We are so pleased to meet you here today. So today we are gonna talk about our future decisions. So where do you wanna go? After the graduation. So do you wanna go to governments? Yes, industry or do academia? So we know that we are all have some concerns for the future when we graduate. So that's why we want to give you some perspectives or the potential directions for your career choice, for your decision-making process, and for your future, of course. So this will be an interactive panel discussion with leading speakers from multiple backgrounds who are Dr. Nandika Bandare, Dr. Dilek Uzunalioğlu, Dr. Subadip Chakrabarti, and Dr. Gülkirpik. And once again, thank you very much for joining us today. We are so glad and happy to see you and have you today. So just for a short brief, first, as I am gonna present the speakers, and then my team member Daniel will provide some questions for you, and then he would welcome your questions. Please don't be shy. And then, yes, after discussion, yes, I am gonna capture final take-home messages from speakers, and then the session will be done, but for just today. So this is Gözde Gülseven and from University of Florida, and my team member is Danielle Dodo from University of Melbourne. We will be moderator of discussion panel today, and this especially as I would like to thank Daniel, because now time is 5, I think. It's in the morning, so thank you, Daniel, for joining us today. And also I would like to thank their Tilini Disaniaki from University of Manitoba for her kindly support. So I would like to present the speakers, and we are kicking off with Dr. Nandika Bandare first. He will share his thoughts from the academia. He is an assistant professor and Canada research chair in food proteins and bioproducts at Departments of Food and Human Nutrition Science, University of Manitoba in Canada. Dr. Bandare's research focus on value of applications of protein in nano-delivery, biopolymer applications in packaging, and biomedical materials and protein processing with particular interest on sustainable extraction technologies and non-thermal protein modifications for functionality development. So thank you very much, Dr. Nandika. We are so pleased to have you today. Then we continued with Dr. Dilek, and then she will share her thoughts from the industry section. She is a research and development leader with experience in managing research and development programs, projects, and technical teams to develop functional foods, ingredients, and products. She is currently Senior Director of Food Discovery Design at Motif Food Works, leading food science and yes, application research developments for Motif yes, ingredients portfolio and plant-based foods. Prior to joining Motif Foods, she led ingredient global bakery and snack application team, as well as the global plant protein application team, with responsibilities to develop its application capabilities. She holds a PhD in food science from Rutgers University and bachelor and master's degree from food yes, engineering from Middle East Technical University in Turkey. So thank you very much, Dr. Dilek. We are really happy to see you here today. And next speaker will be Dr. Subhadip Chakrabarty. He will provide his thoughts from the governmental side. He is a senior scientific evaluator currently working at the infant nutrition section of Bureau of Nutrition Science in Healthy Canada's Food Directorate. He also PhD in medical science from the University of Calgary in Canada, and postgraduate certification from Humber College in Toronto in Canada. Prior to joining Healthy Canada, he worked at the University of Alberta, and his project covers cell biology, inflammation, cardiovascular diseases, and food science, with a special focus on bioactive properties of food-based peptides. So this is really interesting topic for me too. And thank you very much, Dr. Subhadip, today, and for your participation. And last speaker is Dr. Gül Kirpik. She holds a PhD in food science and human nutrition for University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and she has been gaining some expertise on global nutrition and food processing. She received bachelor degree from Istanbul Technical University, and she has done a number of internship and part-time jobs in many companies such as Danone and PepsiCo. She has recently joined the research and development core team of the cereal partners worldwide, which is Nestle and General Mills, as a research and development scientist. Her current role covers various core brands, renovation and product development. So I think she is maybe more close to us because she just graduated, and then right now she can share her journey with us. So thank you very much, Dr. Gül Kirpik. And there, Daniel, I think is your turn right now. And thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or maybe good night as well. Please feel free to pick which one is good for you. My name is Daniel. I'm from the University of Melbourne. I'm also the career and then the coordinator for the students group. So I'm gonna start to share my screen. Okay. Okay. I hope you can all see my screen. Okay. All right. So first on our agenda is to welcome and introduce the introduction of our speakers, which God just did. So once again, we are welcome to today's mixer. So we start off by first asking some general questions for our speakers. So these questions are coming from the moderators, and also we give the platform for all audience or participants to also ask some open questions to the speakers. And the last of our agenda is to see some take-home messages from our speakers. So we will start now. Okay. So the first part of our mixer is to ask some general questions from our speakers, and this is a 1 minute answers from our speakers. And we will start in this order. So we have the first, the questions will be answered from the 2 speakers from the industry, and then 1 from the government, and then 1 from the academia. So now let's start. So the first question, which I'm also quite curious because I'm a PhD student, is when you were a student, where do you intend to go? Whether you want to go to the industry, academia, or the government, which is quite a very difficult thing to ask because you have many choices now you on your plate. So I'd like to ask the experts on this question. When you were a student, did you intend to work in your academia, industry, or government? And if yes, what was the main reason for that? And if not, what did you have in mind? So Dr. AJ will begin the question answering for us.
Yeah, I can go ahead. First of all, thank you very much everyone for arranging this great mixer, and thanks for great introductions and everything. And it's nice to see all the familiar faces again in here. I missed you guys all, so it's nice to be in here today. So regarding this first question, as a freshly graduated person, I would say it was for me academia first in the first place when I started for my master's and PhD. I would say I was thinking that I will be staying in the academia, but then I had a chance to do several internships during my grad education, grad school in here too, and I realized that I enjoy doing some product development type of work and like business being in the industry. So I decided to move a little bit forward to that area, and that was basically the reason that I'm not right now in the and having my first experience in the industry, I would say.
Well, thank you very much. That was interesting. So followed by Dr. Dalek.
Dr. Dalek.
Can you hear me now?
Dr. Dilek.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
great. It's awesome. So good to see everybody. What a great crowd, right? So it's wonderful. So yeah, I will say what Ece said. I actually never thought that I will work in industry from my elementary school years, right? I was so confident that I'm going to be a faculty one day. And I did so, right? After my PhD, I did work as a faculty 1 year. But then, you know, what made me the change? It was a little bit, I'm gonna not make like big dreams and things like that. It was a family reason. And I did find out that, you know, in industry, the reason and one thing for me switching to industry was I really wanted to do something innovative, an industry that I can create and innovate very rapid pace and then bring things to life. And I had the opportunity. I think I was lucky that I worked. My first job working in a company was an ingredient space, and I loved it because every day I innovated, I problem solved, etc. Right. So again, it depends where you want to be, but like it's really hard to say, and things are changing right as you go. So just I would say just keep that in mind. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, things are really changing. And yeah. Okay, so next is Dr. Sabadip.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I must say that thank you very much for all the organizers and everybody who has shown up to listen to us. And before I start my answers, I will just clarify that everything which I say today is based on my own personal experiences, and I'm just representing myself and not my employer or the government of Canada. That's just a declaration, clarification, whatever you want to say. So to answer the question, I would say when I was a graduate student doing my PhD, my primary interest was to be in academia. I kind of looked into the other options and I went to a few career talks, career seminars given in the graduate school, but predominantly my interest was to be focused in academia. And it was only when I was doing my postdoc and applying for faculty positions and thinking and then looking into what the kind of environment is depending on the availability of faculty jobs, the availability of research funding, and what are the alternative options are. And only then I got really interested into the government side. And one other thing which kind of oriented me towards the government was that certain limitations in academia. I found that everything is so dependent of external funding, and the job situation wasn't the greatest it appeared to be. And one of the things is that sometimes we feel that we are too theoretical. We are working only to find out some solution to a minute part of the big story. And maybe our only goal appears to be, at least in the short to medium term, just having a publication out. While in government, where you're making the decisions every day based on real life issues, finding real life solutions for problems. And if the stakeholders didn't care about it, and stakeholder is a word we use a lot in government, and then government would not be doing it because there's always so many interests to do. And so I found that I was more of a person who had a lot more different interests, was curious about having the more applied aspects of science. And that way, I got more and more interested into a government career when I was a postdoc and research associate. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Sabadip. So the last is Dr. Nadeka.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you, the organizing committee and the AOCS for inviting me, and everyone who's participating as well. So I actually had a weird path to being in academia. I didn't start to become wanting to be in academia. Right after my undergrad graduation, I actually went into the industry, not for the product development or anything. I went to a marketing division in an agrochemical company. So my degree was in agriculture, so I went into a marketing division, worked there for 1.5 years. Went into banking sector as a manager in one of the bank in Sri Lanka. So I had a completely different career path before I started my grad studies. Then only when I come back to grad school to Canada, I started developing an interest in academia. So to be honest, I had no intention, let alone being in academia, I had no intention of doing a PhD at the time. So I went to my first job 1 month before my graduation. So that's a path I took. But then when I'm in grad school, I find it interesting. Since I worked in kind of a high stress situation in marketing and management, I realized that industry is not the place I wanted to go at that point. I wanted to stay in the academia because I liked what I was doing, especially in the research and everything. So I decided to go through that path. So I came from as I said, a kind of a weird background, not really a straightforward academic experience. No.
Wow, thank you very much, all speakers. That was really interesting. So that leads me to my next question. When you were a student, which resources did you use for looking for the jobs in academia, industry, and in government jobs? And what advice will you give to someone just starting out, just like myself, to start my PhD now?
Should I go ahead and start this time again?
Yeah, yes, you can.
Okay. Well, for my case, I did definitely use university sources. We do have this career business office, I would say, that brings all the job applications and offers in one place that every student can have an access and check and apply through there. So that was one of the sources that I was using. And we also had career fairs happening in the campus twice a year, I believe. I was joining those ones. Again, AOCS, IFT, those kind of communities have a great sources for you to check any possible applications, like open applications, I would say. And the other source that I was using was LinkedIn, constantly and actively searching, and still actually I'm looking any options and everything. So it's always on my side. So I'm always checking those ones. I think those were the couple of options that I have been using. There are a couple of websites too that you can check. I'm more familiar with the websites in Turkey as well, but in here I was also checking. I believe it was Indeed that you can go and check. But those are the most sources that I have used. Of course, all my mentors, my advisors from the university, my friends who are already in the business, already in the academia, always I have been in contact with them. So I think it's important to keep the connections with your peers and your advisors, your mentors from the university as well. and probably being a member of the alumni committee of your university would be very helpful for you to check all the possible options.
Okay, thank you so much. That was really valuable. So the next is Dr. Dalek.
I guess like what Ece said, pretty much. I don't want to be, oh, I agree with Ece, but I think one thing that I would like to highlight is the network, right? Like even when you are in your master's program, PhD program, make sure that you network with people. And please, please, please do not hesitate to send your resume out to those people that you met, and do it with a purpose, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's your, like after the resume, send it out, you're gonna show your abilities, what you can do, but use those networks. I think that's really critical. And I actually had the chance to use a lot of those networks that developed through IFTs, AOCS, cereals and grains, and even internships, right? After you do the internship, please keep that relationship, send messages, let them know what you are doing. So that's really important and critical.
Thank you. So next is Dr. Sabedev. Which resources did you use to find jobs in the government sector?
Okay, so in the government, the answer is a little bit complicated because every country's government works differently. So you have to find out, depending on which place you're located in. I guess there are people here in Canada, US, Australia, and maybe a few other countries. So you have to, a lot of the things, so the specific part, you have to tailor it to the individual country where you are located in and where presumably you are looking for jobs. In Canada, most of the government jobs we are at present in one website. You access it from www.jobs.gc.ca. You apply through that. There is also a few other options, like sometimes people go into government on a postdoc or a fellowship or a visiting worker, visiting student, several different programs, and that's how they do. In my case, it was a little bit different because after my postdoc, I took a short course in regulatory affairs from Humber College, and they have an agreement with the government that people who finish this course and government recruits a number of them in a time-bound, like 6 month or 1 year program, and then many of them are absorbed into the government. I came in actually through that. I initially joined the government on a 6-month contract, and then afterwards I got a 1-month contract, and 1 year contract, and then I became permanent employee. And so there are multiple different ways to go. And at least in Canada, many of the positions are also advertised as a pool. So you apply to the pool, and a pool is not a specific job position, but you apply, the government evaluates your CVs and then stores some of the CVs as assessed. And then somebody in a government department, they want to hire 1 or 2 people. They don't have to run a full-fledged competition. They just grab 5, say, 10 CVs out of the pool. They do phone interviews, and sometimes people used to come in for a visit. Nowadays, it's mostly phone or Zoom interviews, and then they get the positions. Now, so this is so it's a little bit complicated, but there are multiple options, and that's how you do. So this is more the Canada specific things. And if I want to say something which is more general, I would again say what others have said. It's very important to know people, to network and connect with people. And LinkedIn is a great resource. If beyond LinkedIn in your university or institution, you know somebody who knows somebody who works in the government, try to get an informational interview with that person. Send an email and maybe have a brief chat over a phone call or a Zoom. A lot of people are happy to help out. A lot of people are happy to talk, and they can share their experiences. And finally, one other thing I would say is that you keep an open mind, learn about things, find out resources online. There are sometimes people talking about what's present in the government, what are the skills you need to be there. And later on in the future questions, I will go into those. So I don't want to bore people or take all the time, but that's about it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was really good. So the last is Dr. Nadika.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the academic jobs, the best places to look at is through some of the common job posting sites. So in US, we have well, not just US, but in general, Indeed and higher education jobs. Those are pretty good resources for jobs around the world. But if you're looking for something in Canada, so I just posted something in our website. So, that University Affairs website, any position that advertise in Canada, usually it's not mandatory, but it's almost mandatory to post in that website. That's one of the mandatory place that in any search in Canada that we posted. So any academic position, if you go to that site, you can see that like usually post in that particular website. Other than that, like I really agree with what Dilek mentioned, like networking, even though like this current position I had was advertised at the time that I was in Dalhousie, I actually got an email from one of the professors here asking that, okay, we are opening this position. Would you interested in applying? So you get that through the interactions that you have in like conferences or in a workshop or just randomly in LinkedIn, right? And I do get like some requests, or like, are you interested in this position through LinkedIn most of the time, even right now from some of the industry positions. So best way to find those information is through your network as well. But obviously, like when it comes to the university, just like Subhadeep mentioned, there is a requirement that you have to post it in a certain place. So checking those website is a good source for sure. But at the same time, networking would be the best opportunity because when people know you, they will ask you to apply for certain specific positions when they're looking for someone. So that's pretty much what I would suggest. And I did post those like links, especially the University Affairs one in the chat box, so you can take a look if you're interested.
Okay, right. Thank you very much. Yeah. So that was very interesting. So among all your answers, the main resources you all used was through networking. That was really good. Thank you. The last question will be, is there anything that you regret doing or not doing when you were a student? Because sometimes we finish school and we wish we had like gone for some conferences and then we have expand our network, but we didn't get to do all those stuff. And then we get to find out after school that, oh, we could have done that when we were students. So do you have any regrets or something you didn't do when you were a student? We always start from AJ again.
Oh, that's a hard question. This is a difficult one. I mean, I think it's a good thing that I don't have any regrets about what I haven't done during my like student life, I would say. One thing that I could do more, probably like doing a little bit more internships during the grad school. I had a chance to do one during the PhD, just for one summer, and I was grateful for that because like my advisor was very okay with that too, so it was a great opportunity for me. But I could do similar things during the semesters as well, which would bring me a little bit more experience too. But other than that, I would say I had a great PhD journey with a lot of different experiences, not just like doing the lab work or anything, but I had a chance to travel to do research, like field work. I had a chance to go to the conferences, join a lot of communities. So those are the things that I'm happy that I have done. And one of the things that I haven't, like I would be regret is like I could do more of those like activities probably in addition to the research that I was doing. And unfortunately, one of the reasons that I couldn't do was like half of my PhD corresponded to the COVID. That was one of the like probably hurdles that I had. But again, I think I'm lucky in that sense that I was able to do majority of the stuff that I planned to do during my master's and PhD in the States.
Thank you very much. That was really good.
Of course.
So next is Dr. Dalek.
Yeah, AJ, it's funny that you said that, you know, most of your PhD was during COVID. Like, I cannot imagine, I guess, doing a PhD during COVID, right? I mean, yeah, kudos to you, right, for that. I mean, anything, yeah, I agree. Like, it's a tough question to answer, right? I'm gonna say a couple of things here. Like, one of the things that I wish I did, I really love the dance and folk dance. So I started a team like doing some folk dance during my PhD years, but then my coursework and the lab work picked up and I dropped it. I wish I didn't. I keep going with it. But to your point, like I think, so that's one. The second one is that, I didn't publish all my papers before PhD. So, and I regret that. And I encourage everybody to do so before they finish their PhD, before they get, and Dr. Bandara, you are making sure that everybody writes those papers that before they leave, because when you start in the industry, like every time I talk to my PhD advisor, by the way, this is 20 years ago for me, he always reminds me those, right? Dilek, you didn't write the paper that you were supposed to, right? So that's one regret I have. So I encourage everybody to make sure you complete them before you leave and start working for industry. And third, I agree. Like, I mean, you know, just don't focus on your work. Like, there are so many things that you could do and involve, right? Like, not just your PhD, making sure that I would say go and attend product development competitions, attend competitions, right? Just enjoy the full experience. I think it's really important, and you will see a lot of benefits of it as well in your professional life as well.
Thank you very much. That was super good. So next, Dr. Sabedin.
Okay. As for the regrets during the PhD level, I don't have much. I probably could have taken a bit more opportunities to teach undergrads, and that's something I lacked, and that might probably have helped to get a faculty job when I was looking for it. For the postdoc period, I will say that one of my regrets have been that I was too focused on getting an academic career. Part of the reason was that my postdoc was funded through fellowships from a national and a provincial agency. So there were certain kind of requirements to meet the deadlines and targets, and I was reasonably productive in publishing, but I got a little bit too focused on doing the research and getting papers out. And maybe in the first few years of the postdoc, I was just so focused on the academic thing, I didn't look into the other non-academic career options. And I probably should have looked more into the government things a bit earlier. That's what I can say. So.
Wow. Well, thank you. So the last one is Dr. Nadika.
Thank you. So Dilek bring up a really good thing. Like, it's not just when you go into the industry that you forget to write the papers. I still have one paper that I should write from my PhD. And every time that I go to a conference, when I meet my supervisor, he remind me that, trust me, regardless, even if you are in like academia, you will not have time to finish. Like, you cannot catch up. Like, it's not going to happen. Like, you think that because I'm in academia, I have time so I can write my past papers, right? But regrettably, most of the daytime we use for meetings and other things, and you only get chance to write when you're actually at home. That's why we work at night. That's why we work in weekends, which is not ideal, which is not a balanced life, right? But as much as you can, try to get all your work published within the PhD. Like, you might think, no, I will do it at home, but trust me, for 3.5 years, I couldn't publish my last paper with my PhD. So that's something that I learned with the hard way. So just don't do that. Other than that, like, in terms of the regret, like, I don't think I really have one, because as I said, like, I went into the industry, I went into different fields, and then I kind of experienced everywhere, except actually working in a food industry itself. Let's say something like a product development or something like that. Other than that, like, I experienced the management side, the marketing side. So it was a great experience. But I wish I had a chance to actually work in apart from the internships I had during my undergrad or some other place. Like, it's pretty good, but I wish I had a chance to like work in a food industry as an internship when I was doing my PhD, which I didn't really get the chance. I went for an internship, but that's also academic internship to a different lab, not really to the industry. One thing I believe is in Canada, it's a little bit harder to find industry internships, unlike in US. In US, I know you guys have much more like opportunities for industry internship. We don't have it that much, especially if you're in a, like a, let's say, I did my PhD in the University of Alberta. So there are not many food industries around. So maybe in Toronto, maybe in BC, you may get opportunity to work with industry, but not much when you're in a different university. So I wish I could have done that, but other than that, not really like a big regret. But yeah, write your papers. That's important. Regardless where you go, just finish writing. It's not going to happen afterwards. Even if you switch the lab to go to a different lab, same thing. If you start a PhD in a different lab, you're not going to write the papers in your master's program.
Oh gosh, I wish I talked to you before. I feel a little bit better. Not happy, but a little bit better that you didn't.
Trust me, I still like I'm working on that paper. I need to really get that one out. My supervisor, my PhD supervisor asked me during the EFOS meeting as well. So yes.
Okay. Oh, so much information. Thank you very much. That was really good. Okay. So then last, we are done with the question from the moderator. So now we see some questions from the audience, and I will go first. I'm just curious. My question is to all the speakers. So is there a connection between having a publication and working in industry? How does working in the industry has to do with you having a publication? Because I know in academia, when you have more publication, you have a higher chance of getting maybe becoming a professor or getting some job a promotion in your job or in your current department, or becoming head of department or a vice dean. So in the industry, how does having a publication help you? Does it help you in getting a promotion, or help you to advance in your current position in the industry? So anyone can.
I mean, maybe I'll just go first because I kind of talked about it. Now I need to explain why, right? I think two things. One is that, first of all, feeling an accomplishment, right? That is a record that you were expert in that area and you implement it, you bring it out to world, right? People know that you are an expert in this area. And the jobs that I have been working and the jobs that I have been hiring, personally, I look into that, right? I look at the publications, what people did in the area, how, because that's a commitment, right? Like you did your PhD work, that's great, but you publish it, people are citing it, so you are a proved expert in the area. And I mean, in the jobs that I have been working or hiring, that's really important for us when we look into it in the job candidates. And what is the area talking about, like technology, innovation, you know, those areas we do look for experts, and we do look for experts who has publications and published publications, book chapters. These are important. Yeah.
Thank you. How about Dr. Sabade? How does publication help also in the government sector?
Okay, so it depends on what kind of position you are in the government. The government employs certain lab scientists. For them, publication is critical. Like they are hired based on their publication records. They have to manage or run projects within the labs, and their output based on publications is evaluated annual basis, and that depends on their promotion and things like that. Then there's a second group of people who are more either in the regulations, like I do, like evaluation and regulation, or some of them do purely regulation, or some of them are in regulation, compliance and enforcement. For them, day-to-day publications as part of a government employee is less important, but it does help. I mean, part of it is that, as others mentioned, that it's part of like your sense of accomplishment. As a part of it is also when you are hired, like you have a good track record. So that plays some role, but it's not as critical as in academia. And even within government, when you're working in government in a regulatory or evaluating job, you have the opportunity to get publications by collaborating either with the government lab scientists or by writing review articles, sometimes within the government, sometimes with outside the government. And it depends on your specific job situation and what kind of projects you are working on. And sometimes you need to seek permission from your manager, but that's possible. Like I've been working for Health Canada for 5.5 years. And based on my work I do, I have been able to be a co-author on 2 different review articles, and likely we will have another review article coming up in the next year.
Wow. So thank you very much, both Dr. Delek and then Dr. Sabede. So there's a question in the chat. I'll start from from Gopika. Sorry if I couldn't pronounce it. So it's a very good question. I think this question will go more directly to Dr. Delek or AJ. He said, what's the essential qualification for getting into the R&D department in the food industry? Do a PhD is a must for it?
I can go first for this one.
Okay.
Well, first of all, starting from the second question, do a PhD is a must for it? I would say it's not, but depends on the level that you're applying for. So some of the R&D scientist levels are more specifically opened up for the PhD education level, or in general, it's not really a necessary level of education, I would say, to get into an R&D department in an industry. I do have in my team, majority of us has like holding PhDs, but also like a significant number of people in my team has either bachelor's and having like certain amount of years experience in that area. But we are all in the same team working as an R&D scientist in different levels and different expertise areas, I would say. So I don't think that it's a must, but it definitely has a great plus in terms of like you're bringing a great critical thinking to the team. You're bringing a great expertise with your background to the team. Those are definitely advantages of it, I would say, but it all depends on what level you're applying for and what position you're applying for in the R&D department in general.
All right. Thank you very much. So just a follow-up to Kofi's question. So AJ, the publications also have impact on when you started working in the R&D department?
So during my interview interview process, interview time, I did get asked like about my publications from the managers, from the people who were interviewing me, but they were more curious about the work that I was doing. It was not like the number of publications or like where I published it or anything. They were more curious about what I was working on and if it is related to the area that I was like applying for in their department. That's the main reason that they were questioning in that sense. But it's definitely a plus if you, as Dr. Dilek mentioned, like it's a sign that you have like you wrote the commitment, you finish what you need to do during your PhD. So it's a great sign about like your time management and project management as well. But for my case, I got mostly asked for the publications, the reason to ask if I am closely working in that area, and they were just more curious about what I was working in during my PhD.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Dr. Dilek, do you have anything to add?
In terms of PhD, yeah, I mean, it depends on what the role like you are applying. Yeah, some roles definitely requires a PhD, as Ece mentioned, like critical thinking, problem solving, able to solve problems, and knowing where to go, right? That's what we learn in PhD, right? Most of us, when we are doing a PhD, we are working on a topic that maybe we are the only one, but we learn how to find the solutions, where to go, where to find it. So some of the job skills requires that, some of the levels requires that. And then Ece's point, like when you have a PhD, it's not like you are losing those 5 years, right? Like let's say you did master's plus a PhD, you completed in 5 years. When you apply for jobs, you're gonna start at a higher level. So you are not losing that 5 years. You're gonna have a higher level and accordingly higher everything else, right? Just keep that in mind. I kind of try to think about that, right? Because I did a PhD at my job, I started at a much higher level. It was not a loss of doing a PhD or master's. And plus also, I think, again, depending on the organization, but I think PhD brought me a lot of advantages, moving quickly in my promotions as well. But of course, right, I mean, it's not just that because you had a PhD, but you also need to show a lot of qualities in, especially in the industry, like ownership. And you learn that through your PhD, right, sense of ownership. You learn about being a good problem solving, right? So those are the qualities that you get, and it helps you a lot as in your promotions, moving around the company as well. Yeah, it's not a must, but I think it's going to help you a long way.
Wow. Thank you very much. That was really good. So this is the next question from Rose. It's a very good question as well. It says, should an internship carried out during PhD studies be closely linked to your research project? This question goes to all speakers because you all have PhDs. Anyone can take the floor.
Yeah, I will just add something related to that question and something related to previous question as well. So in terms of the internship, like regardless whether you go for an industry internship or academic internship, having some relation might help in certain situations. Sometimes doing something completely different will help you as well. So that depends on the situation. So when I did my internship, it was not really related with my exact work. And I use it as a justification when I was looking for my academic position. So saying that I did some different type of research work during the internship. So just to show that I can adapt to different research environment, different research setting, right? So sometimes doing something different is an advantage. But if it is something like, let's say, job is too specific on your exact work, then doing that different internship might not help. So it depends on the situation. At least that's what I get. And one other thing that I really wanted to add regarding the publication, whether it's important in the industry question. For industry, Dilek explained it very well. But one common misconception about academia is like publication is everything. And if you have higher number of publication, you're going to get the academic job, which is not true. In 2 academic jobs I had within these 3.5 years, one at Dalhousie, one at University of Manitoba, all the other candidates who compete with me had almost double number of publication than me because I was just coming out of my grad studies. So even in academia, it's not just the number of publication. One of them is the quality of the publication. Number 2 is you need much more other qualities during the faculty interview, more than the number of publication. Because once you do the PhD, once you have a decent number of publication, you are qualified to have a faculty position. No one asked me about how many publications I had or like how many I'm planning to publish. They were asking about the bigger picture. What's the research vision? What is your plan for this particular area? How you're planning to secure funding? So it's more about that leadership and looking at the bigger picture. That's what they're evaluating more than the number of publications. Because this is, as I said, like one of the common misconceptions, people think, oh, I need to produce 10 publications with a PhD. Having more publication will help, don't get me wrong. Like if you have more publication, it's an advantage. But I can show multiple examples where people have like so many papers, but never manage to find a faculty position because they don't develop teaching. They don't develop leadership skills. They don't develop that big picture, like the research vision. That's more important than just trying to increase like only the number of publications. So even in academia, you need that leadership qualities. You need that like internships. You need that organization skills, everything. Those were the questions asked from me when I had both interviews. So just to put it out there.
Wow, thank you very much. That was really good. So Dr. Sabade, wanna go?
Oh, I just want to add on to that, like for an internship or things like that, it doesn't have to be anything related closely to PhDs. Like in case of government, it's really good that if you have worked in different fields, different areas, you can show your ability to integrate science from different parts. They still have to be bioscience, but bioscience is, as we all know, as enormously diverse. It might be cell biology, might be peptides, might be biochemistry, might be epidemiology, might be a little bit this, might be a little bit that. People who have worked into more interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary, transdisciplinary, they sound like big buzzwords, but they all mean something. And if you have more of those experiences, you will be doing much better in government because our work involves so many different interests, so many different stakeholders, and we really, what we do is that we integrate a huge amount of knowledge. And so the more experience you have in working in different areas, you are going to be better suited in. So in other words, like don't just be the master of a tiny area. I'm not saying you have to be a jack of all trades, but still at least have some expertise in a few areas, and it will be a good career development anywhere outside academia or even in some case of academia. Don't just study one pathway in one cell or one organism for 6 years and that's it. Do something a bit more. So
Thank you.
You shall certainly do that. So AJ, your turn.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing from my personal experience from the internships that I have done during the PhD. So the internships that I have done were like in large companies, which like accepting applicants from everywhere, in every backgrounds, in every university or in everything. And when you're applying for those internships, actually you don't really know where they're going to put you, like in which project, in which department, or which team that you're going to work with or anything. They basically match you with your background, with what you're working on, trying to find something close to your like interest areas and everything. For my case, let me give you one example from my latest one. Like in PepsiCo, I was more given into a team who are more working in the cereal business. one of the reasons that I was selected for that team was I was working with the cereals and grains for my PhD as well. It was not 100% related. It was not really like directly connected or anything, but they found that little like connection between my background and the team. So they put me in that team, and but the project and everything was totally unrelated. But one of the things that I highly suggest when you're getting into the industry, like getting into the internship, I think one idea that you need to get is to understand the culture and how the businesses and industry goes, and like try to see the process of it. It doesn't really necessarily need to be like 100% related to your research project. That you need to take it as a like separate experience to get the idea, what is the business like, what is the industry like, how can I like work as a R&D scientist, as a person who is holding a PhD in food science, and how can I be involved in those kind of projects and those kind of businesses. So I think that's the important part.
Thank you very much. Dr. Dalek, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, in terms of internship, I agree, right? It doesn't need to be necessarily clear cut to what you are doing in PhD. And Ece, you are right. I mean, usually, like you kind of look into some. I mean, also it depends on the project, also a little bit, right? In some internship positions, yeah, you are looking for a very specific person to work on very specific thing, then I think it brings a lot of advantages to the companies to hire somebody who is PhD topic is that. And most of those internships also, like companies are looking for publications. I mean, yeah, that is true. The company is looking for patents, etc. Like they are going to hire people who knows the area very well. But again, it's from the student standpoint, it's not necessary. I mean, I think internship is a great opportunity to learn how the industry is working, making sure that like just making sure that you engage with everybody and anybody, making sure that you connect with every single team, making sure that you take every advantages to meet and connect the people. And to your point, Ece, it's kind of funny. So when I got my internship at PepsiCo, I did it in PepsiCo too. And then finally I met my advisor per se, and he said, I hired you because you are an engineer and you're gonna build a chromatography column. And I'm like, huh? Like, yes, I'm an engineer, but I never worked with chromatography or done an HPLC, right? But I learned it and it was a lot of fun. So, and as you said, Ece, they don't necessarily look into detail. Yes, I'm an engineer, but I never built a column, right? So.
Just
Wow.
one single relation. That's it. I think it's helping them to just separate the people like to the right teams and everything. But again, it doesn't have to be necessarily 100% what you're working on. It's not really possible, to be honest, to find like exact like role in a company for an internship with like matches with your like background and project that you're working 100%. So in case you're not like working in a research institute or in a laboratory or something that you're collaborating for your research during your PhD.
Wow. Thank you so much. That was really nice. Also, there's a question for Dr. Sabadep. It's from Iman Pratt. He says, could you please give more information on your day-to-day responsibilities in regulatory sector in federal? Yeah.
Okay, so this is my typical day, and it does vary quite a bit. So the bulk of my work involves is evaluation of submissions. So submissions, like it could be from a new infant formula, could be a new infant formula ingredient. These ones we do review as part of our group, a part of our core group, but I also contribute to some of the discussions and evaluations with other products like food additives and novel foods. So if anybody wants to sell such a product, a new product into Canada, they have to get a pre-market authorization or clearance from Health Canada. And so that way, and when we try to evaluate something, there are two main fundamental principles. A product that has to be sold, that could be sold in Canada, it has to satisfy the corresponding sections of the food and drug regulations. Every country has its own kind of regulations, and it has to be compliant with the regulatory aspects, as well as it has to be safe. And if any health related claims are being made, they have to be supported by data and evidence. And if you don't have it, then it can be rejected, it can be modified, we have back and forth, and sometimes these evaluations go for months, even a year. And so that takes up a bulk of my time. Beyond this evaluation work, I also contribute to some of the regulatory modernizations, which is interesting because we work in a complex team, which includes bioscience people, which includes lawyers, which includes regulatory specialists, which includes policy people who generally have their master's degrees in sociology or economics. So we kind of all approach things from a very different angles. And sometimes we understand each other, sometimes we don't understand each other initially, but then we get to understand each other working in teams. And those are all involved in the ongoing regulatory modernization of different aspects of the food and drug regulations. And that's quite interesting. And the third part, what we do is that offer some kind of specialized advice, either to other teams within the Health Canada. Somebody wants to look at something with the inflammatory or immunological aspect of the food. And because I worked in inflammation during my PhD, they know that, so they might just ask my opinion, or we can have a short discussion, or we might suggest that this is how we could phrase this question or not. And another part is that, very interesting, Health Canada, like many other regulatory agencies, receives a huge amount of questions from members of the public. Some of them are very science focused. Some of them can be a little out of the box or really, really unusual, and you still have to provide some kind of answer. So there are people whose full-time job is Health Canada is to respond to these questions. Like in a food director, there are 2 or 3 people who kind of focused on it, but oftentimes they need specialist advice, and then they contact the relevant section and we try to address the question. That could be somebody might be concerned about the kind of chemicals that are in a particular food item, or whether consuming this kind of food item in childhood is going to give an increased risk of allergies, or then you have to provide some of the points. And we had a few this kind of questions there was a recent shortage of specialized infant formula, and there was a lot of concerned parents, and we tried to address their questions. There is also a lot of interest about promotion of breastfeeding versus use of infant formula. And while breastfeeding is always preferred, and there are very many people who cannot do it for various reasons, and so there has to be a regular, safe, and affordable supply of infant formula for those who cannot do it. There's also a lot of questions, concerns, and a lot of misinformation about things like genetically modified organisms, about things like vaccinations and such. And Health Canada, in different sections, they receive a lot of questions about it. And oftentimes people who have a scientific background, as well as understand the regulations, are tapped into, their expertise is tapped into to provide a valid scientific, legally valid opinion. So it's an interesting thing. In one day, I might be working on 5, 6 different topics. So that way, like having the ability to multitask and having a lot of different interests and having worked in a lot of different scientific areas, that all helps you.
So thank you very much. That's very interesting. Okay, so we have some questions from the moderators as well. And the question is, what do you think are the advantages and disadvantages of working in academia, industry, and government? So are these questions for all speakers? So we start from AJ.
Well, for the industry part, I would say I enjoyed learning the business, and I like enjoy being in the industry. That movement in the industry makes me happy, I would say. During my PhD, I mean, as you all know, you're focusing on one like area like for about like 5 years or so. For my case, what part like make me more excited about the industry was like every day is a new thing. Every day you have a new challenge. Every day you're dealing with probably new project or something. Sometimes it's stressful. Sometimes you need to have that skill that adjust yourself based on the calendar, based on your agenda. But it's a energetic environment, I would say. That's the one thing that I'm happy with the industry for now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so move to Dr. Dalek.
Yeah, I think for me, the advantages of working in the industry as follows. I really enjoy, developing new and bringing to life. And like you kind of experience that every day in industry. And it's a lot of fun because as you are doing it, you are problem solving every day. You have to use your creativity. You need to come up with solutions, and there is no for an answer, right? Like it is very challenging. It is very nice challenge to have working in the industry. However, one of the things that I really miss, and I am trying to create opportunities to do so. Yes, you are working on you are working on bringing things to life and having consumers, right, to experience it. I mean, it's a great thing, but at the same time, you are doing a lot of firefighting, you are constantly problem solving, and having a, you know, that science mind. I wish that I spend more time also reading, so that some of the things that I cannot get a lot of opportunities in the industry, like, you know, setting up some time so I can look at the literature, I can see what's happening, you know, in academia, in the research world. So it's really hard to do that. What I'm trying to do is that I promise myself, you know, I will at least read one paper every month. And I only don't promise this to myself, I also tell this out loud to my team, my colleagues, and then I make them accountable to ask me if I did that in the month. But I think that's one of the disadvantages, right? But what do you do for that? As I said, making some commitments, putting in your objectives, putting in your to-do list, and also, of course, opportunities like this, right? All the organizational events, the conferences, right? Find an opportunities to go to them, listen with a purpose, etc. So I think that's the disadvantage, but you should find ways to work it out and find a way. Yeah.
Thank you. So we move to Dr. Nadeka.
Okay, so the main thing, like since I work in the industry and then move back to the academia, like the main thing I like about academia is the freedom, what we call as academic freedom, right? Like, yes, when you're doing your PhD, even when I did my PhD, I was stick to one particular theme and I had to work on it for like 4 or 5 years, that's true. But once you get a PI position in a university, then you have the freedom to expand your research to whatever the direction you want. Yes, I was hired for the food, protein, and bioproducts program, but that doesn't mean that I cannot work on starch. That doesn't mean I can work on chemical engineering. That doesn't mean I cannot work on anything literally I want. As long as I can secure funding, the important part, and as long as I can justify that research work, I'm free to work on any interested research area that I want. So even within my program, like I think Tilly already know that we work on material science, we work on food science, we work on biomedical materials. So I have like different projects with a completely different objectives and completely different research areas. So it's not even like similar. So I really like that freedom because I want to work on biomedical materials. So I just go and find funding for that, which is obviously challenging, but that doesn't mean that it's going to stop you, right? So the downside is, I think Subhadeep did mention that funding situation is like fiercely competitive. Most of the grants that we have, the success rate is around like, I would say 10% or less. So usually what we call is once you submit 10 grants, if you're lucky, you will get one. So far, I managed to kind of go away from that odds and I managed to get funding, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to get funding all the time, right? So it's challenging. So that's the downside because funding gets competitive and it keeps getting competitive. So that's a disadvantage. Not a disadvantage, I would put it as a challenge. But other than that, that freedom and the ability to like collaborate with anyone, because I'm not mandated by specific research line. I think in industry, like it's not something bad about the industry, but I think like if DLEG, you have a specific mandate for the like shareholders' interest, right? Which you have to follow. But in the university, we have that freedom to navigate the research the way that we want and do some like, if I want, I can do fundamental studies just out of the curiosity. That's another advantage. So that's the main thing I see in the academia, but everything like have plus and minuses. So.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. So the last is Dr. Sabedep, and then we close for the question section and move to the takeaway messages. We only have a question from Paulo but we will forward this question to all the speakers after because we are behind time. So the last comments from Dr. Sabadip, and then we move to the takeaway message.
Mhm. Can I just answer that? I did see that question on the chat. 100%, right? I'm glad that you asked that question, Paulo, sorry. 100%, right? I do believe that, you know, anything that we are working on, any new technologies, we need to collaborate as well, right? It's not just, it's really hard to say, oh, it's industry, it's academia, it's government, right? Especially me personally working on very new technologies, that's a must. Like there are so many things that needs to come together, and we definitely need collaboration between academia, between government, between industry. And as I'm unfortunate enough that working for a company that values all of that, because right now, like we have collaborations with 10 universities, and which is I'm very proud of, and I think you're gonna see more and more companies doing that in the future. That's how we're gonna innovate in the food industry. We have a lot of issues. We're gonna have more coming, and yeah, we just need to work together. I hope that answers your question. So it is not just industry and R&D, it's the collaboration of everybody together.
Yeah, thank you very much. So yeah, we have Dr. Sabedin with the final answer to the last question, and then we move to the closing, the follow-up messages. Yeah.
Okay, so for the advantage and disadvantage, like everything, government will have some advantages and disadvantages, and this can also vary from people to people. So I would say the two major advantages, I think, one is that whatever we do, it has a direct application, and it is very, very socially, economically, politically, as well as scientifically and legally relevant. And oftentimes people in the government and university think that, oh, how does my research affect the life? What am I doing? What is its worth? Is anybody going to read my thesis or my papers? Nowadays, because of Google Scholar and other things, we can at least know that more people can get to read it and cite it. But anyway, so everything what we do in government, somebody needs it. If a stakeholder didn't care about it, government is not going to fund it or not going to assign a project, because there's always too much demand, and we sometimes have to prioritize. So this is the first big difference. Whatever you do, you are serving science, you're serving the government, serving society. So that is number one. The number two, I would say, is that the work-life balance is better, and there is, and as Nandika mentioned, that there is always, like, you're dependent on external funding and grants in academia. And government, there is, generally speaking, there is a more of a stable funding for doing your day-to-day work. Certain projects, they might have a specific funding assigned to it. It might remain, it might be removed, but you at least have a basic funding to continue your work and get your salaries and have a better work-life balance compared to most people in academia or industry, I think. So those would be the advantages. As for the disadvantage, there could be certain limitation of what work you are doing, like what Nandika again mentioned about the academic freedom. Like once you have your money, you can do whatever you want to do, almost. And in a government, you still have to follow certain guidelines, and there are priorities and those projects. You can collaborate with others. You can find time to write a review article and things like that on the side, but still the bulk of your work would be directed by what comes up on your plate. And that is fine. And it's generally, you still have a lot of enough creativity and enough, at least in my position, I work with so many different people with the different groups and interact with them. So it is quite interesting. And I don't think that I get bored at all. So, but some people might. And one final thing I will say, in government, there's a big cultural difference compared to academia. Some of you probably know the saying, loose lips sink ships. In government, there is a big focus on maintaining privacy and maintaining confidentiality, because we oftentimes deal with various stakeholder groups, various businesses, various special interests, and we have to be very careful about it. In academia, everybody wants to talk about it. You ask somebody how your research is going, and they start describing whatever reagent they used and who said this and what that. People do talk shop a lot, people do gossip a lot. In government, you have to be very careful what you say outside the government environment. It's just like it's like a much higher level of professionalism, and you have to be often careful that you don't disclose any information which could be internal government information, or it could be a business information which other companies have trusted the government to evaluate, and then you have a duty to your stakeholders that you don't disclose it. So it's a very different level of things. So no gossiping, no loose lips, and you have to maintain a higher standard of professionalism, which is fine, which generally grows upon you, but it's a big cultural difference coming from the academia. So,
wow, thank you very much. So we are done with the Mesa, and we want to receive some take-home messages from each speaker, just some few words, so we can close up the Mesa.
Where are we starting with? Is it me?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
please go ahead, Ajay. Yes, it
Yeah.
is 5. Yeah, just a short take-home messages, please.
Of course.
Thank you.
Well, as a recent graduate, I would suggest for all of like my peers who are still doing their PhDs, I would say first, enjoy your time, and when you're doing your PhD, take as much advantage as you can from your institutions, from your universities. Try to do all the possible experiences that you can get, like internships, conferences, field works, traveling to other parts of the world to do your research. Those are like, this is the time that you can do all of these stuff. I'm not 100% sure if you have another time, another like chance to do those kind of stuff in your, like, once you graduate. Keep your network as close as possible. That's one of the suggestions that I have. And then again, if you're thinking to go to industry at some point, I would say definitely do an internship before you graduate, especially if you're an international student. It will definitely help you out during the hiring process, because that is one of the things that they're definitely checking for, in addition to your like PhD like research and everything. Definitely take that option if you're planning to do go for an industry in the future. So again, thank you very much, everyone, for joining today.
Thank you too. Okay, so next, Dr. Dalek.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of, it's hard, right? We all have different personalities, experiences, etc. But a couple of things that I would like to mention is, which we all talked about, right? Today I am here where I am because I think I built such a strong relationships during my PhD years, during my industry years. That's one. Secondly, I think I focused on doing my job right so that I can build a trust. So people can come to me and they say, you know what, we give this problem to Dilek, that will be solved, right? That's second. So what I'm trying to say, be resourceful, right? And solve problems. That goes a long way. And become, yes, we talked about, right? Like get expertise in everything, but known for one thing you do the best, right? That's really important. And then secondly, also, you know, like we talk about big goals, but also make small milestones, right? Like I think that's how you're gonna go. Like it's not like, oh, 2 years from now, this is what gonna do. Yes, that's great, but also have short milestones too. And then measure your success, right? Did I do it right? One, how could I have done it differently? And then what else I could have done, right? Let's say you have a 3-month schedule. What should I be doing next 3 months, right? After that 3 months, just evaluate yourself a little bit.
Oh.
So I think those are the things that I would like to mention. And there are so many, right? We can sit here, but those are the things that I will mention as key messages that I would like to give it out.
Thank you very much.
So much. Yeah, thank you very much. It was very informative. So please go to the next one.
So Dr. Sabede, this is your turn.
Yes.
okay. So first of all, just want to say again, thank you for the organizers. And For the government jobs, I would say 3 or 4 specific pieces of advice. One is that keep an open mind, talk to people, find out people who have worked in the government, and try to have an informational interview or even just an email, or connect with somebody through LinkedIn and try to find out some information about it. So, and find out whether that's something suits you or not. And as for the spatial skills, for a government, I can think of 3 things that will really make a difference. Number 1, as I mentioned before, make sure that you have worked on a few different areas, a few different things. Don't just study one pathway in one cell type for 6 years. You do a few other things, have some collaborations, write a review article, publish a review article, go on with a small short sabbatical to different labs, set up a collaboration with another group, either as an advanced PhD student or as a postdoc. So do something, do a few different things, and that will really help you in government where people have to take on multiple challenges, multiple issues at one time. The second thing is that be reasonably good in your reading, writing and speaking English skills, particularly the writing part. A lot of work we have to do is effectively communicate our science and to explain things to people and to mix the scientific validation as well as the legal and regulatory validation and put it all together in one document. And so having a good skill of the written English is going to help you a lot. And thirdly, and a final part is that make sure your CV or resume is effective. Some government jobs might want a CV, some of them might want a resume, and there's a difference between that. CV is a list of everything you have done. Resume is a short summary, which is not more than 2 pages. And make sure that you highlight the key points, what you have done, instead of boring people too much with the details. And this is where a lot of us, when we are graduate students, we want to put too much details. I did this kind of Western blot, I stained the cells with this kind of method, I did HPLC, I did UPLC, I did. Most people don't want to know that. They want to know you were a PhD, you used a few biochemical cell biology techniques, you published this, you got funding from here, you got award for this, you presented here. They don't need to know what kind of cell types you used or what kind of pipette you held or what kind of UPLC you did. Do not put extraneous details. The risk is that you might bore the person and you might lose the person's interest, so they don't see the key points there. And finally, I have talked too much, but finally, the one thing to remember is that for most of the government's evaluator and regulatory jobs, you are evaluating other people's science. So if you have any experience, try to get it. Maybe you judged a undergraduate student symposium. Maybe you judged somebody's poster, somebody's talk. Maybe you help your supervisor with reviewing manuscripts for journals. And once you finish PhD and if you go for a postdoc, you must take on these responsibilities on your own, trying to serve as journal reviewers. And journal editors are happy as long as you have a PhD, you can review journal manuscripts, and it gives you a really good practice to evaluate, to critically evaluate other people's scientific work. And a lot of work I do for the scientific validity, even for the regulatory validity, that experience, like I started reviewing manuscripts with my PhD supervisor, like long time ago. I'm not saying how many years ago, don't want to date myself, but that has been one of the really most effective skills, to judge other people's work critically and effectively. So try to evaluate, try to review manuscripts, and that's a skill mentioned in your CV or resume, and that will keep you in good state in government. Thank you.
Thank you. That's super cool. The last is Dr. Nadika.
Thank you. So before giving my summary, I just want to clarify one thing that Subhadeep mentioned. So once I get the money for a project, I can't spend it whatever the way I want. I have to spend it on that specific project. But in terms of securing money, I can just go and do whatever project. So there's a big difference in those two. Once I get for a specific project, I have to stick with that project from that particular fund. Otherwise, people think I'll just spend carelessly, right? No, that's not how it works. Okay, in terms of the summary, like one of the main things that I learned during my grad studies, as I said, like I did many other things apart from research. So research is important, as I said, like you really need to have a good publication record, but try to use your time to develop the other skills that we will evaluate, especially in academia and in industry as well, for sure. You need good leadership skills. Use a platform like AOCS, IFT, whatever the resources that you have to develop your leadership skill. That's one of the key things. And you can build a network with that as well. Most of the people that I collaborate right now as a faculty member are people actually did the PhD with me. So I have one person from University of Waterloo, but we did the PhD together. Another couple of them from China, like they did the PhD at the same time. couple of people I met in conferences. So that network is the one that you're going to work with in the future, especially in academia. Like, I think industry, it might be a little bit different because there is a competition between the industries, right? Like, which is normal. But in the academia, like, collaborative work is kind of a norm. So your collaborative network, you're going to build it during your grad studies. You can always collaborate with like the established people. It's always a possibility, but most of the time, the people you work with, people you study with is your best collaborators, because you know, like, you have a similar mindset, right? And similar interests. So try to build that network, try to have more collaborative opportunities with your own colleagues. So just don't try to be the isolated person in the lab. That's one of the main things that I always tell everyone. If you become, like, if you isolate yourself in the lab while you're doing your PhD, yes, it's important to take care of your research. You will not build that group. You will not build that like network within. So just try to expand your activities beyond research itself. Again, like, doesn't mean that research is not important, but you need to do the other things while you're doing your research. So that's my main message. And I think one of the person from the audience, I think Paolo mentioned something, take the ownership of the work. That's actually very important. Yes, your supervisor will give you a research project, but that doesn't mean like you can't take the ownership of that work, right? Make sure you take the responsibility for that particular project. So that's a very good comment from Paolo, because the more and more you take the responsibility and try to make it work, people will see you as a strong person that can achieve a certain goal, rather than saying, oh, my supervisor didn't help, or like, I didn't have this particular thing, I didn't have that particular equipment. No, try to make it work with the resources you have, which is a good quality to show, regardless of the academic or industrial, even the government job that you're going to go, to show that you can be adaptive, you can be like changing the things and find the right solution for any problem that you have. So that's a very good comment, came from the audience as well. So that's pretty much I have, and thank you again for inviting me as well. So good to see all of you.
So, okay, thank you very much for this great meeting. Actually, for your beautiful sharing, they were very informative for us. So see you on the next meeting for next journey for us, and then have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
By the way,
Thank you, everyone.
I just want to say one thing. I don't know if you are watching the news, but FDA just got an approval on the cell culture. So it's, I think, an interesting day for meat industry. So
Yes, yes.
I was
Yes.
just getting messages. So I just wanted
Thank
to,
you
but
for sharing.
I thought you may
Yes.
want to know. So it was.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Bye. Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much,
Thank you,
everyone. See you
everyone.
later.
Have a good day. Bye bye.
Bye.